Well, good morning, everybody. I'll do it one more time. You're almost there. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
This is a celebration. I don't know if we've had this many collective minds of genius coming together for something other than the sort of definition of Congress, which is you're not going to get it done. This is a rule and a room that we are going to get it done. And I'm excited that we have a collective body of individuals who are committed to something that is often not discussed here on the campus. It is not the Iran nuclear deal, which we'll be discussing later on, whether or not we'll have the budget, whether or not we're going to vote for or against sanctuary cities. Many of you know that. Whether or not we're going to be talking about GMOs in the agricultural industry, transportation bill that we need to do. Today I'm excited because all of you, no matter what perspective or what office or agency that you're involved in, you've come here for a solution. We're excited about it, and I want you to give yourselves a very big hand. My name is Sheila Jackson-Lee. I represent the 18th Congressional District in Houston, Texas. I'm a former judge, a municipal court judge, a former co-chair of the foster grandparents, of which I was not, but I was asked to be a co-chair to assist in what we call a design for relief for individuals who were grandparents who became foster parents. I am the co-chair and founder of the Congressional Children's Caucus, and work closely with Karen Bass, who is the co-chair and founder of the foster care. But more importantly, have served for a number of years, long years, on the Judiciary Committee under great leadership from Chuck Schumer to Bobby Scott on the Crime Subcommittee, John Conyers being the ranking member. And so you know how long in the teeth you have to be here to rise to be the ranking member of the Crime Subcommittee. As Bobby took another committee, Bobby Scott, I have the opportunity to be selected by my colleague to be the first woman to serve as the ranking member on the Crime Subcommittee. So I am not going to allow you to be a stranger here. And everything I say and speak about is what can we get to the president's desk to be able to be signed. And I love these discussions, and I want you to send my bills, when I say our bills across America, because we need the body politic. But the idea is, however it gets there, to get something across the president's desk. Now, many of you have already worked in your states with best practices, so let me just make a few points and move quickly to you. We must confront difficult and painful truths of incarcerated youth and the desperate need for immediate and continued policy reform. It is my hope that this briefing will be one of many series on conditions of confinement. And might I say, before I continue, I want all my staff to raise their hand. I appreciate them greatly. I have interns, and I want to make note of my chief of staff, Lynn Rushing. I want to make note of a passionate new member, Crystal Williams, who has done an excellent job. And she is going to seek the creating of our Juvenile Justice Task Force of civilians. You may be on many meetings, or many groups. We're not going to be meeting all the time. We want to have this body of experts to be able to address. And let me acknowledge my Deputy Chief Counsel, Tiffany Jocelyn, on the Judiciary Committee. To get something on the President's desk. A series would allow for congressional members and the public to come together and continue this dialogue on the progress that we hope to make as we push forward for reform. And I know that the group of speakers that we have are going to be wonderful speakers. I want to welcome our distinguished panel of guest speakers, many of you traveling from as far away as Illinois, North Carolina, New York, and my home state of Texas. We're all gathered here to elevate the voices of those broken by a system of failed policies, but we know they can do better. Although the Sandra Bland story that I've been engaged in on the last couple of days is not necessarily a juvenile justice, but she was only 28 years old, with her great future before her. What is not said on the television as we begin to see videos that we were able to see. I flew down to Texas for Sunday to meet with these individuals and to see all of the tapes before they were released, is that this young lady had two undergraduate degrees, one master's, her life before her, which is typical of a juvenile. His life or her life is before her. And unfortunately, in an unfortunate set of circumstances where best practices were not followed, best practices are not followed for our juveniles, look where the life winds up. A family is mourning and all of us are saying, why did this happen? How did this happen? How many times do we have to say that for a bright juvenile or a person that we know is a poet, is an author of a great book, is a scientist, is an engineer, is a great actor, is a president of the United States of America? So let me read this quote or this comment from written by an incarcerated youth, DH. 30 minutes in the shower, 30 minutes to use the phone, then back in the cell for 23 hours. I can't wait till I go home. The food is disgusting, the air is stale, I record my phone calls and read through my mail. Every time I come in this place, I feel worthless and cursed. Some guys may like it in here, but I think it's the worst. People are disrespectful and the inmates carry knives, the water is recycled and makes my skin break out in hives. Some guys are very talented artists and poets, but being trapped behind these walls, they never get to show it. In here, it's like you're dead, forgotten, a myth. It's like you never were important. You never existed. We want to break this circle of homelessness. We want to deal with the case of Caleb Browder. The family still making their way here? Did they make their way here? Yes. Please stand up again, please. I am very sympathetic and more than sympathetic. I mourn your loss, but it will not be in vain. And how often do I not want to say that? Because I want your child, your brother, your loved one to be with you. But we will take this story very seriously. Let me, before I understand Congressman Veazey came into the room. Oh, thank you very much. Let me acknowledge, members will be coming in. We're excited about the fact Congressman Veazey came from the area of McKinney, Texas. You all know that. A pool party scenario. But he has been a leader in the state legislature. Can you allow me, I know that we're running for time, but I want to, every member that comes, I just want them to be able to say a word. These are all juvenile justice proponents and advocates and people who want to see the system change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheila, thank you very much for giving me a few words. I'm Mark Veazey. I represent the 33rd Congressional District in Fort Worth, Dallas, Arlington area, and previous to me serving here in Congress, I did serve in the state legislature in Austin, Texas, and really where I first began to work on juvenile justice issues. And it really is important that we look for ways that we can reform the juvenile justice system. We had a terrible scandal when I was in the state legislature, dealing with the Texas youth justice system there and what was happening behind those walls. We know that our young people, if they unfortunately find themselves in those circumstances, that they need the opportunity to be able to reform themselves, to make themselves better so they can come back into society, be able to raise a family, take care of themselves, get services that they need. I read a story in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram years ago that talked about how some of our young people commit certain crimes so they can put themselves in that particular situation so they can get help from mental services because they're not getting the mental service treatment that they need on the outside. That's terrible for somebody to feel they need to do that. And so I think there are a lot of different issues that we need to look at and discuss, but I'm glad that we're really starting to have a conversation and take this more seriously and not just really see it as a criminal justice issue, but see it as an opportunity to give young people a better chance and an opportunity to make themselves better when they come out. So Sheila, thank you very much for your leadership on this issue, and I want to thank everybody for participating today and for such a great turnout to talk about something that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I'm delighted to see my mentor and the representative of my mentor, the giant of justice in our Congress and in the nation, and that is John Conyers. And Perry Applebaum is the staff director. We know that John will be coming shortly, but wave your hand, Perry. Thank you so very much for helping us with all of this. Thank you. Let me quickly add these points as I was mentioning about Caleb. I want to make sure that I acknowledge, I shook her hand, but I'm going to give her a hug some point during the day. His mother, Mrs. Browder, Benita Browder, brothers Rakeem Browder, and his civil rights attorney, Paul Prestia. Thank you again very much. This young man's spirit was not broken. He maintained his innocence, but he was not convicted. I give them my deepest condolences because no family should have to address this question. His name will not be forgotten. His legacy will be one of catapulting this nation into action on criminal and juvenile justice, something that we can get forward on the President's desk. I ask all of you to join me at a press conference immediately following with House Judiciary Ranking Member John Conyers and myself. Be introducing legislation named in honor of Kaylee Browder regarding solitary confinement and banning it. We'll also be introducing reforming alternatives to incarceration and sentencing to establish a better path for Youth Act. It is a lot to be said, but it's called the RAISE Act, which provides provisions for youth charge in the federal system, including enhanced judicial discretion and sentencing, increased home release and end the mandatory life without parole, housing programs, and just turning their life forward. Fair Chance for Youth Act creates a mechanism to petition for sealing or expungement. The effective and humane treatment of youth. Caleb's law represents a comprehensive and humane treatment to the criminal justice system. Sadly, Caleb is not alone, as countless other youth have also endured the tragic harms that result from prosecuting youth as adults. We have here major leaders in this area, and I'm very grateful that all of you will be here to speak. I want to, as I conclude, give you this last story as I present these wonderful experts from an individual who will call himself a proud returning citizen. This is to be read. It is an individual that I met who is a miracle, clearly, in terms of what he went through, not getting the treatment, and where he is today. Please listen. I'm going to read quickly so that I can but please try to get the gist of it. During my 20 years of incarceration, what became evident fairly quickly was how the system is designed to strip you of any individuality and place you neatly alongside everyone else for the sake of process. You are no longer a youth, as your mustache and beard naturally thicken, despite still being a teenager on paper. I witnessed youth offenders, some as young as 14 years old, manipulated like putty in the hands of seasoned adult prisoners. Their lives further hijacked by peer pressures unfathomable to a juvenile's mind. Sadly, with the rise of longer sentences and the fall of support for education and self-improvement, I watched an old prison pastime take on a new meaning, prison gangs. In the absence of constructive programs and the hope of redemption, the brotherhood and protection that these gangs offer has no competition. As a consequence, I've seen more youth come out of the system resembling the tattooed and seasoned adults that manipulated them in their early years and with very few prospects for the future. I was blessed to have had the opportunity to receive a college degree during my years of incarceration. I cannot stress enough the impact that it has had on my life and on my preparation for reentry. In fact, the only former youth offenders I know who are employed, or more importantly, are living above mere existence, happen to have completed the same college program I am. Yet these are the programs that get cut out of budgets first. The time is right for the nation to take a look at this issue. Youth, by the scientific makeup of their maturing brains, are redeemable. And we in this bill have raised that age to 21. We know we need to go to 24, but we're trying to make our stair steps up beyond 18. The cost of creating processes that allow for that redemption to take place far outweigh the rising cost of incarceration. As a backstory to this individual, he had been brutally beaten outside of the jail and wound up in a violent situation, had no mental health support, had been abused by a family member. None of that was gotten out of him while he was in the trial situation. He shut down. Nobody got into him to give all that information, and you know what happened. He got life beyond life, and it was only in appeals court to realize he had not been treated fairly. This individual now has a major, major business, and it is unbelievable. So I'd like to turn this table over to you. Starting out, I'll just be introducing, and are they going in order of their seating, or by the way I have this? Is that the order of the hearing? Or just by the seating? Okay, well, we'll let them jump in as they so desire. Thank you again. Chris Wilson, Director of Community Workforce Development at Greater Homewood Community Corporation, was sentenced to life in prison at the age of 17, but released by a judge who decided to give him a second chance after spending 15 years at the Tuxtla Youth Institution and 1 year in an adult facility. He, of course, achieved a goal of earning high school education, Spanish, Italian, Mandarin, Chinese, mentoring. He's a miracle as well, and he earned a scholarship to the University of Baltimore Business School and started several businesses to hire ex-offenders, and he has now the Greater Homewood Community Corporation. My speed of giving you these introductions are by no means diminishing who you are. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Sebastian Goodson, Exodus Foundation. Sebastian entered the adult federal prison system at the age of 17, too early, resorting to what he calls the belly of the beast. He reports of living among adults, such as Timothy McVeigh, John Gotti, and others, and recalls hearing grown men cry at night, despairing of life when they missed the funeral of a loved one or were recovering from the brutality of prison rape. Spent 10 years in solitary confinement, resorted to counting holes in the wall, earning a business degree, and an honor roll student at ITT Tech. He serves as the National Director of Advocacy for Exodus. Thank you so very much. Mark Sola, Center for Children's Law and Policy, good to see you again, is the Executive Director of the Center for Children's Law and Policy after graduating from Yale and Yale Law School. Mark served for 28 years in various facets of the Youth Law Center. I know he'd like to see more legislation signed by the President. A national public interest law firm, Senior Staff Director, and has had a long, storied history in the idea of juvenile justice reform. Thank you and your organization. Gail B. Mumford, Senior Associate, Annie E. Casey Foundation, which has been a cornerstone of change throughout the nation. We want them to do more. Gail has currently managed the expansion and replication of the flagship juvenile justice initiative of the country, the Juvenile Detention Alternatives. JDAI is the most widely respected juvenile justice reform initiative in the country, now spans 39 states and the District of Columbia. And prior to that, she was at the Missouri Division of Youth Services, where she spent another storied career and has maintained her leadership at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. Thank you so very much. Dr. Jaya, is that correct, Davis? JS. It is JS, Professor, Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice at the University of Texas at Arlington. We're delighted that she has come all the way for this very special time. My fellow Texan, thank you, the Juvenile Detention Alternative Coordinator for Dallas County. She just saw her Congressperson, Mark Veazey. The focus of her almost 20-year publications is juvenile justice and delinquency, specifically disproportionate minority contact of youth criminal justice education, institutional correction. She has a roadmap. She's an advisory board member for Girls Embracing Mothers, Inc., where the goal is to empower girls of incarcerated mothers and giving them that infrastructure and support. Thank you so very much for traveling all the way here. Antoinette Kavanaugh, PhD, APPP, Knowledge, Charity, and Passion at the intersection of psychology and law. Dr. Kavanaugh earned her PhD in clinical psychology from Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. Dr. Kavanaugh served as the clinical director of the Juvenile Justice Division of the Cook County Juvenile Court and clinical professor of Northwestern University School of Law for 10 years. I'm delighted that she is here. She's been in private practice, but keying the medical element of what happens to juveniles and the juvenile justice system is crucial. Thank you so very much for your work. Jennifer Davis, the attorney, Maryland Public Defender's Office, Juvenile Court Division. She has over 16 years of experience representing children and juveniles throughout various divisions and units in the Maryland Public Defender's Office in the Juvenile Court Division. Ms. Davis currently represents children. She is a practitioner in all stages of delinquency proceedings. And we are grateful for a practitioner being here and a whole long leadership of that. Thank you. I'm trying not to get it before I finish. Debbie St. John It is Jean? Okay. Director of, I thought it was French. All right, Director of Maryland Office of the Public Defender's Juvenile Protection Division, serves as the director of that division, one of only few such groups in the country monitoring conditions of confinement. This unit provides post-dispositional representation in both placement and detention, ensuring the facilities are in compliance with federal and state law for juvenile clients. We're very grateful for another practitioner and the service that she has done as an administrative class counsel in one of the largest class action lawsuits against Maryland, creating a systemic changes as well as monetary awards to 800 children who had been physically abused in the Maryland boot camp. Thank you so very much for that merciful litigation. Certainly, finally, last but not least, Marlo Johnson, veteran officer, Maryland Department of Corrections. Marlo has experienced a multitude of challenges and changes that have taken place throughout the criminal justice system, to include the rapid increase of incarceration. Ms. Johnson served as a correctional officer for 24 years at the Patuxent Institution in Jessup, Maryland. Her tenure of this facility afforded her the opportunity to work in a vast and diverse population. We're delighted to have Marlo Johnson here with us as well. Thank you so very much. Let me acknowledge the civil rights attorney at Prestige Law Firm, Paul. Thank you so very much. The JD was received from St. John's University School of Law, began his legal career as a prosecutor in Kings County District Attorney. Throughout the decade, he has successfully handled and tried a wide array of criminal cases as a litigator. He has settled many cases, but he has real life experience, and I thank him for his passion and commitment to help the Browder family. You've seen it from both sides. The way I'm going to do it is I'm going to ask the doctor to go, and then there is the last person on the end. I'm going to ask you to go, and then I'm going to turn to the Browder family, and then we'll work our way in. Thank you so very much, Doctor. You're on. Would you give them all a very long applause?
Thank you for this opportunity to make some brief remarks about the research of adolescent development. Through the work of researchers such as Drs. Jay Gee, B.J. Casey, Jason Chen, and others, we now know more about normative changes that the brain goes through during adolescence and young adulthood than we knew 25 years ago. Science has afforded us a better understanding of how, unbeknownst to the adolescent or young adult, these normative developmental changes in the brain impact behavior. In short, we now know that as a part of normal adolescent development, adolescents and young people are wired to take more risk, act impulsively, and are more easily influenced by their peers than are adults who are in their late 20s or older. For example, when adults and adolescents are in a simulated driving situation and their peers are watching, adolescents take more risk and have more crashes than they do when their peers are not watching. And this is not the case for adults. Consistent with these behavioral differences, research shows that brains of adolescents and adults function differently in these situations. Research has also demonstrated that the parts of the brain that allow a person to anticipate consequences, regulate emotions, and control impulses do not function as well during adolescence and early adulthood as they do later in life. And this is the normal developmental process. Additionally, research has shown that adolescents are more vulnerable to providing false confessions and are less likely to understand and appreciate the importance of their Miranda rights, even though they frequently waive these fundamental constitutional rights. These findings are not surprising when you consider the normative biological changes of the adolescent brain. Specifically, as a class, adolescents and young adults are more impulsive, risk-taking, and seek immediate gratification. In closing, in my clinical opinion, because of these normative developmental changes that youth undergo, it is imperative that those who interact with youth in the juvenile justice system, this includes police officers, judges, and attorneys, as well as those who work with adjudicated youth, receive training on normal adolescent development and training on how to interact with youth in a manner that reflects an appreciation of normal developmental differences between adolescents, emerging adults, and adults. In my opinion, understanding these differences is the cornerstone to treating youth in a just manner and increasing their competency while addressing issues of public safety. Thank you for allowing me to make these remarks.
I too wish to thank everyone for the opportunity to give some testimony about what we do in Maryland in a very unique situation. The Juvenile Protection Division is a unit that monitors the conditions of confinement and provides post-dispositional advocacy in 14 Department of Juvenile Services facilities, including both detention and commitment facilities. We monitor residential treatment centers, both in Maryland and outside of Maryland, which house our clients. We ensure that the commitment orders are followed and that the facilities are in compliance with state and federal law, as well as with the youth authorities' policies and procedures. A post-dispositional advocacy unit checks that children are not languishing in detention while awaiting trial or placement. We in Maryland are one of the very few post-dispositional advocacy groups in this country. Unlike many other states, Maryland courts do not lose their jurisdiction once a disposition occurs. Our courts retain jurisdiction until that child turns 21 years old. The court rules in our Juvenile Causes Act allows the Office of the Public Defender, the child's attorney, the opportunity to bring that child back to court should the facility not be providing the services that the court ordered. This is essential to protect children committed to an out-of-home placement. In many states, the child's lawyer doesn't have any recourse to get back to court. Children stay in confinement without a voice and without any legal mechanism to get back to court. We still, even in Maryland, find juvenile court judges who do not seem to accept the social science research that finds locking children up for nonviolent offenses does far more harm than good. It also does more harm than good to continue to incarcerate youth who have successfully completed their program of rehabilitation. This was recently detailed in a New York Times article in December of 2014 concerning a juvenile court judge in Prince George's County, Maryland's overuse of detention and punitive measures. Children were retained in secure confinement despite completing the program, despite completing their individualized treatment goals, and despite repeated requests from the facility for the child's discharge, because the court did not think that the child had spent enough time. To get an appeals court to fix what was clearly an illegal sentence in Maryland takes months, and the child remains confined awaiting the appellate decision. In the case detailed in the New York Times, that child only got out of detention because another judge had fortuitously taken the place of that judge sitting for the day, and her case was closed. Again, a post-dispositional unit has the ability to identify children that have successfully completed their program. Maryland's Youth Authority participates in Ms. Mumford's program of the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative. And I will let Ms. Mumford and Mr. Solar talk about those initiatives and how important they are to the safety of confined children. I do wish to speak about one area of JDAI's assessment, and that is in education in both detention and committed programs. While I can speak specifically about what education is like in Maryland for these children, we have found that unfortunately it is like that in most states in this country. We know from the Surgeon General's report on youth violence that poor academic performance, if left unaddressed, contributes to delinquency and increases recidivism. Peter Leone from the University of Maryland in an article talked about the unmet educational needs of children in the juvenile justice system. And he found that 2/3 of boys and 3/4 of the girls screened for psychiatric disorders in detention centers met the diagnostic criteria for one or more psychiatric disorders associated with special education eligibility determinations. yet had never been identified as under the child find obligations of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act as children who are eligible.
Is your mic on? I'm sorry, I just walked in here. Is your mic in front of you? No,
I don't know.
And then if you push the button, is it? I need to hear you way over here.
That the children under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the child find provisions, had not been satisfied. These children were found to be grades behind and operating academically at an elementary school level, yet no accommodations for their disabilities. The Maryland Department of Education, the state educational authority in Maryland, took over the responsibility of educational services in 14 facilities in 2009 by an enactment from the Maryland legislature. They completed their takeover of these educational programs in these facilities in July of 2013. 4 months later, the Juvenile Protection Division filed their first class action complaint against the Juvenile Services Education Program in November of 2013, complaining that education in these programs is significantly inferior to similarly situated students in the public school setting. Violation found. Denies equal opportunities to access a quality education. A violation found. Denies children with disabilities educational instruction that meets state and federal standards. Violation found. Modifies individualized education programs to accommodate only the services that the facilities can provide. Violation found. And if the Juvenile Services Education fails to provide accurate records and transcripts upon discharge, denying these students a seamless re-enrollment in their home schools. Violation found. As of today, the corrective action plan is still open 2 years later. After 6 years, these facilities continue to lack no consistent curriculum, no continuum of placements like a self-contained classroom, lack of textbooks, no internet. Their IEPs are modified for the services that the facilities can provide. They're violating child find by not identifying children that are eligible for special education services. They have a lack of qualified teaching staff, and despite the federal assistance of neglect and delinquency grants, the money is moved into different areas. These deficient programs in Maryland affect 4,000 minority children each year. As I've said, they're grades behind, and they are operating at elementary school levels. Since the first complaint filed by my division in November of 2013, we have filed close to 20 more additional complaints. Despite monthly meetings with the Juvenile Services Education Program that began in April of 2014, these deficiencies continue. If we cannot provide education to these children, they will not have a successful re-entry. It's very important. Thank you.
Paul, why don't you lead out? Make sure you turn your mic on. Thank you so very much, and we'll turn it to you and the family members, and then we'll go to everyone else. Thank you so very much.
Good morning. I want to thank the Congresswoman for her nice words and for proposing this legislation invoking Khalif's memory and his name. Unfortunately, it took his death to bring some of these issues or problems of the criminal justice system, and that's an understatement, to light. However, I know it provides his family some solace, a semblance of justice, but I won't digress into that at the moment. Khalif Browder, his case represents an utter and massive failing of the New York City criminal justice system at every level, from his arrest, which was based on a tenuous and suggestive show-up identification in May 2010, to the 3-year and 15-day prosecution or non-prosecution by the Bronx District Attorney's Office, which presumed him guilty and manipulated the speedy trial laws of New York State, until ultimately they dismissed the case the charges against him without so much as an apology. And what's worse is his incarceration. That 3 years and 15 days, two years of which he spent in solitary confinement. 2 years, which included a stint of 14 months and 10 months. 10 whole months, 14 whole months in solitary confinement in a 9x12 cell as a teenager. That's right, he was 16 when he was arrested, and he was innocent. But in any event, I cannot articulate, if Khalif was here to articulate his experience, he'd put you in that cell. I don't have the time to do that today. But I'll just mention a few moments, well, not moments, a few of the horrors of what he endured. He was frequently deprived. He was supposed to get 3 meals a day, 3 meager meals. Oftentimes, they deprived him of those meals. In fact, on one occasion, in April of 2011, when he was just 17, they starved him for a day and a half or 4 meals. Right, and at that point, they also dangled food in front of his cell just to rub it in. He was also supposed to get a shower every other day. On one occasion, he went 14 days without a shower, and instead had to sit in that cell and smell himself for 14 days. Just imagine how humiliated he probably felt. He was supposed to be provided an hour of outdoor rec time a day, but oftentimes, if you speak to Khalif, more often than not actually, he never went outside. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in that cell. Imagine what that did to that young man. And in fact, it did. He attempted suicide on 5 occasions in 2 years in solitary confinement. 5 times, including 3 times in a 31-day span in 2012. And he wasn't even given the proper medical treatment or the proper psychiatric care after those attempts. In fact, on 1 or 2 of those occasions, he was beat down by corrections officers, almost as if to punish him for what he had done. Punish him for making them work harder. And this underscores some of the problems which are endemic in our jails and our prisons. Corrections officers who are trained to protect and ensure the safety of those inmates. Oftentimes, as was the case with Khalif and other young men and women, those inmates are at their mercy, and there's nothing they can do about it. In any event, what's perhaps most saddening about Khalif's stint in jail and solitary confinement is he went almost 2 years without any human contact, any productive human contact. And obviously the damage was irreparable. When he came out in June 2013, he made progress. He tried, he really did. I know his family knows that. However, his bad moments outweighed his good moments, although he did have some good moments, and I should mention that he recently finished a semester at Bronx Community College right before he took his life. And ironically and incredibly enough, he wrote a paper on solitary confinement, a research paper, and he didn't even cite himself, which I think is remarkable. And it was remarkable that he was still standing after what he had endured and been thrown out back into the world. But that being said, despite some good moments, he had more bad than good and too many nightmares to overcome. And I think his family, who's here today, knows that better than anyone. His mother, Vanita, and his brother, Raheem, who lost, and of course, the rest of his family who couldn't be with us here today, who lost a son, an uncle, a nephew, a brother, and they came down today to speak about this, and they know the import of his story. And I'll introduce Vanita Browder at this time.
I'm Vanita Browder, Khalif's mother, and I appreciate everything that's being done now. I would much rather have my son, but before Khalif went to Rikers, he was like any other teen. You know, play video games, got in a little trouble here and messing with his brothers, normal kid. But unfortunately, you know, snatched off the street, coming from a party. The next 3 years, I had to visit my son. And there's a little bridge that where the bus goes over to get to Rikers. Every visit, I cried on that bus going there. I cried even more going back, because once I went to visit him, I hear the stories. And you know, you as a parent, a mother, you want to do everything to protect your child, but you can't do anything with him there. You know, so it hurt. It took a lot out of me. But then I knew, you know, the next visit, I was going to see my baby again. So it kind of got a little okay. But the torture that he went through, being starved, being beaten, he was told that they were going to break him. Because, you know, he was a little tough, you know. They didn't like that. And the stories he told me of the fights with the inmate, every time I went to see him, I checked his face, you know, because they have pictures of people that's with shanks that they slice the face and all like that, and you get, oh my God, I hope that doesn't happen to my kid. But he survived it. And as far as the education goes, he tried to get education in there. But once you're in solitary, it's like they put you in and throw away the key. You know, and they would give him an assignment now and then wouldn't come back to pick it up for 2 weeks later. You know, so it was no good. But when he came out, he got his GED on his first try. He went to college, but Rikers just had too much of a grip, you know, so he dropped out. But then I had to talk. I said, look, Khalif, prove everybody wrong. Prove that you can come out and you can do something. You're not just a statistic. You know, do what you got to do. He enrolled back into Bronx Community College. He just finished his first semester as a freshman with a 3.5 GPA. Now, imagine what he could have achieved if he wasn't messed up for those 3 years, if he didn't have the haunting memories of what he went through. But he wasn't the same child as when he went in. He had bouts of depression, paranoia. He just went through so much, and he went to the psych ward. He got admitted to the psych ward again. They give him medication, sometime over medication, and then sent him home. That's it. So he said, Ma, I don't want to go back there. But I don't want to go back to Rikers either. He had a job as a security guard, and he quit. He said, Ma, I cannot see me sending another person to that place. That's how bad it is. But he tried, and there were times where we could laugh and joke, and the next thing you know, he's back in his box, in his solitary confinement. And just one day, he just got really paranoid and said, Ma, I can't take it anymore. I can't, I don't know what to do. But I didn't understand. You know, all I could do was try and talk to him, but he was at the point that I don't even think he heard me. And next thing you know, he went upstairs, and that was it. He hung himself. And I just heard this loud noise. I was downstairs. So I ran upstairs, and he had kicked out the air conditioning vent. And all I saw was a orange sheet, cord, whatever it was. So I ran back downstairs, and I opened the backyard door, and there he was, hanging with his head snapped back. That's something I will never forget. And had it not been for this system that destroyed my son, I wouldn't be sitting here now. You wouldn't know of Khalif, because Khalif would still be alive and life going on. But he stood up, the judge got upset with him because he wouldn't take a plea deal. I mean, she really got upset. And she threatened him with a 15-year sentence. She said, all you have to do is take a plea deal today, you go home. He said, no, I'm good. She said, what do you mean, you good? He said, I'm good. So she sent him back. Next court day, same thing, same deal. You could go home. I know you want to go home. He said, no, I'm good. He was not going to plead guilty to something he didn't do. He believed in the justice system, but they didn't believe in him. They did not believe in him. He asked for a speedy trial. He never got it. some court dates, they didn't even bring him to the court. And I'm like, well, where's my son? Oh, he didn't come today. Why? So it's a lot that goes on at Rikers, and I told my son, I said, look, you gotta be careful. They have their own rules there. You know, it may be laws that govern them, but inside, they do the governing. And if you tell on somebody, you get beat for that. Khalif got kicked so hard from one of those steel-toed boots in his back from a CO. They sent him to the infirmary. His back swelled up. And for a while, he kept complaining, Mom, my back hurts, my back hurts. But I'm on the outside. There's nothing you can do once your child is locked up at Rikers. They need a complete overhaul. But the justice system also needs to take accountability for destroying my son. That they're not going to do. It would be a miracle if they did. But he's dead because of what he went through at Rikers. Let's see.
Mrs. Browder, none of us would want to have you here today with that story. But you have elevated your son's story, not to a New York story, but America's story. And as I said, we've never had this combination of committed individuals to be here to listen to your story, and we thank you so very much. We cannot imagine your pain and your grief. As you were talking, our dean, the leader of the Congress, a gentleman who is chaired and ranked over the Judiciary Committee, you have his attention for many, many years, and I know you know his name. The Honorable John Conyers walked in, and when he walks in, I know you should know that we mean business. Chairman Conyers, I don't know if you want to, her son has to speak now, but we are happy to yield to you now if you want to listen to the son. All right, and so the brother of this beautiful young man that died because of the solitary confinement, his lawyer is sitting there as well. We're ready to hear you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My brother was the youngest of 7. He was a typical kid. My mother mentioned him being tough. Khalif was never a tough kid. Khalif was always a punk. He would run his mouth. He couldn't back it up. He liked to play sports. He liked to play with his brothers. All of us, we used to go and hang out with each other until one day he got arrested for something that he didn't even do. There was different stories. One cop said one thing, another cop said another thing. There was no evidence linking him to the issue. The supposed guy that he committed the crime on wasn't even in the country. And as my mother said, they just, every single time we went to court, they just kept on pushing it back. My brother was basically tortured during his time at Rikers. He was not only beat by the inmates, he was also beat by the officers. When something happened, it was either, go ahead, you can go and report it, but then we're going to kick your butt again. Or you just stay quiet. And supposedly every single time, when something got out in the open, how they figured to fix it is the officer is going to be retrained. That's not going to do anything. All it is for the public eye to see that they're trying to do something. It should have never happened in the first place. There was a video going around that you see my brother, he's in handcuffs. The guard opens the door. My brother's just walking. Then all of a sudden you just see the officer slam him on the floor and put his knee in his head. For what? My brother's in handcuffs, what can he do? He can't do anything to the guy. There's more videos, there's worse videos than that. that my brother would tell my mother. But my brother, you know, he went from, like I said, I mentioned earlier, he wasn't tough, but Rikers completely changed him. When he came out, he was no longer my little brother. At first, I was a bit upset because I'm not into that street mentality, but I really didn't understand what's going on and what they did to him. But he changed, I even told my mother. But then little by little, I started to see my brother started to come back. My brother was in there for 3 years. He missed the birth of his niece and his nephew, who he loves, which are my kids. Every time he would go to them, he'll go, "Oh, hey RJ, how you doing? My son is a little shy." He backs off. I'm like, no, say hi to your uncle. "It's all right, bro, I love him. I love you, RJ, I love you." Then later on, when it's time for us to leave, then my son runs over to him, gives him a pound, gives him a hug. The first Christmas he came out, my brother was so excited. He loved his niece and nephew. He went to Toys R Us. He asked them, "Oh, what do I get for their age group?" The lady just showed him the section. All my brother did was just start grabbing stuff, putting it in the shopping cart for my kids. My kids were so excited. My son did some dance he saw in a cartoon, and he saw all the presents in front of him. But like my mother said, and like Prestia said, he couldn't get the horrors out of his head. I got a call from one of the other brothers telling me I had to rush home. I said, what happened? So then he said, my mother, she's screaming. He can't understand what's going on. I had to speed down to my mother's house. And then as soon as I got there, I see the ambulance, I see the cop cars in front. And I start walking in, and the officer looks at me. He says, "Sorry for your loss." I said, "Sorry for my loss? What do you mean, sorry for my loss?" That's when I found out what happened. So I go in the back. I had to see my brother laying down, face first, sheet over his head. And then I had to hug my brother's lifeless body. And for what? Because some idiot said that he stole his book bag and the guy wasn't even in the country. So I lost my brother because of a damn book bag, excuse my language.
Okay.
And what did the system do? The system is supposed to help people. What did the system? The system did nothing for my brother. Nothing. And I blame the system for the loss of my brother. And I'm so happy. It's unfortunate that it took this to happen, but my brother is making major changes, and my brother's memory will live on. And I just hope that people remember the nice stuff that we're saying about my brother, because my brother is not an animal. The system made him like that, but then it took time, and then he came back to the self. But unfortunately, it was too much for him.
I know that the speakers will have a powerful statement, and we look for them to be able to finish, but if you would indulge me to yield to the ranking member of the former chair of the House Judiciary Committee, who has been sitting here being moved by your story and will listen to the rest of you, has joined me in leading on this legislation on juvenile reform and law enforcement integrity. Ms. Tarns, do you want to say a word at this time? Other speakers are going to finish after you.
We do.
Yes.
Greetings, my brothers and sisters. The first thing I want to do is thank all the panelists for being here. And the second thing is to express my appreciation to all of you for joining with us. And then finally, my colleague, Sheila Jackson-Lee of Houston, Texas, a senior member on the House Judiciary Committee, for allowing me to work with her on these 3 measures that are designed to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Reforming alternatives to incarceration and sentencing, the Fair Chance for Youth Act, and the Effective and Humane Treatment of Youth, known as CATIV's Law, which abolishes solitary confinement of offenders less than 21 years. This is a defining moment in the criminal justice system. And I think that because of these tragedies, but because of our persistence, we're going to be able to make a difference. Between my leader from Houston, Texas, and myself, and other members in both the Judiciary Committee in the House, the Congressional Black Caucus in the Congress, the Hispanic Caucus in the Congress, we're going to be able to make a difference. And that's what this thing is all about. I salute all of you that are here and urge that we continue to work together and share experiences. We have a Congressional Black Caucus coming up next month when we return in September, 3rd week in September. And we want this to be front and center for people coming in. To showcase the determination and concern that we have about the tragedy that brings us here today. So I thank you all for allowing me to sit here with you for as long as I can. Thanks so much.
That is an invitation for you all to stay and join us as we introduce publicly these major pieces of legislation, and we'll have the family comment again. But we want to hear, and let me just see the hands of who have not spoken. So I can tell you that we must finish at 11:45, and so we're just going to go down, and we would allow, we'll be putting up points at about 2 minutes, so that we want to get everyone in, and this is not your last time on the Hill. Some of you have been, but you heard our ranking member, and we're ready to go. In my words, do not comprehend what a mother and brother and family had to experience, and what that singular act of coming and seeing your son after the devils or the demons just would not leave him alone. None of us can stand in those shoes. What we can say is make a national statement that we'll see that never, never again. So again, I want to thank the Browder family, and I'd like to start. And again, we'll be a little bit lenient, but we'll have the sign up about 2 minutes, and any overall we'll be able to give leniency at the end. Welcome again. Thank you so very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, for this opportunity. I'm very honored and privileged to be sitting here with you discussing this important topic. We know that the farther that a juvenile penetrates the juvenile justice system, the more likely that that juvenile is going to return to the juvenile justice system or be involved in the criminal system.
Is your mic on?
It says it's on.
Okay, then pull it down. There you are.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
For those of you standing, there are seats. I know that standing means you can exit quickly, but there are a lot of seats. Please feel free to take them. We welcome you. Thank you. There we go. This is important for those. Looks like a gentleman there that's a youngster, and glad to have you here. Good.
So we certainly know that there are a number of variables that have been identified to predict this outcome, and the conditions of youth confinement are among those variables. We also know and have recognized for over 50 years that youth of color are more likely to be overrepresented at each negative decision-making stage in the juvenile justice system and underrepresented at each positive decision-making stage. For example, according to statistics by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention in 2013, African American youth are arrested 130% more often than white youth, referred 170% more often, detained 30% more often, and yet deferred out of the system 30% less often than white youth. These statistics aren't simply numbers. They represent young faces like Khalid Browder that stare back at you every time you go into a detention facility, young brown and black faces. There's been long-standing rhetoric, excuse me, that if black and brown youth commit more crimes than white youth, that this overrepresentation would be appropriate. However, while researchers have found that minority youth in some cases commit slightly higher rates of offenses for certain crimes, it doesn't justify the rate at which they're being arrested and processed in the juvenile justice system. So clearly something else is happening. My research tried to look at differential involvement versus differential treatment to examine the juvenile justice decision-making process after the point of arrest. If we take into consideration arrest rates, which should hold constant any differences in offending, then we should see parity in subsequent decision-making stages throughout the system. For example, if black youth are arrested 10% more often for, say, robbery, then we could justify a 10% overrepresentation in subsequent stages. Unfortunately, unexplained disparity continues throughout the juvenile and adult justice systems. While we don't see the extremely high rates of disparity that we see at the arrest stage, we consistently witness 60 to 70% of unexplained overrepresentation of youth of color being confined in the juvenile justice system after we take into consideration any differences in offending. Further, when type of offense is considered, the disparity is highest for lower-level discretionary offenses like public order and drug offenses. I wanted to go into the high rates of arrest rate, where we arrest 2 to 5 times more often African American and white youth, but my time is up, so hopefully we can get to that later. Thank you.
Thank you. Finish that last point.
Okay, sure.
So that'll be a little.
So, as important as looking at the conditions of confinement and trying to have parity in the juvenile justice system, we also need to address the largest area of disparity, which is the arrest rates. Research indicates that youth of color do commit some offenses at slightly higher rates, but depending on the area, are arrested 2 to 5 times the rate of white youth. The reasons for this disproportionality include over-policing, social distance between law enforcement and youth, higher rates of school failure, as we talked about, poverty, fewer human and social resources.
Thank you.
High rates of arrest rate and low levels of explained disparity give the perception, if not the reality, of unfairness in our system. Thank you.
Thank you so very much.
See how well I do with speed reading, so it's good to be here in the presence of pain, triumph, and promise. In 1983, I had the good treasure of starting my justice career with the state of Missouri in its youth correction system, a system filled with people who were courageous enough to first acknowledge that the approach simply wasn't working. And after confinement and our one-size-fit-all residential placements that children were not getting better, they returned at an alarming rate, and on any of every measure, we failed. However, we had the audacity to imagine something different. A system which considered it unnecessary, cruel, and inhumane to place a young person in flip-flops, khakis, and color-coded tees with a laundry list of institutional do's and don'ts, locked in a cell with little to no contact with families or norms of adolescence, and somehow believe that they would be rehabilitated. Time will not allow me to talk about the Missouri transformative process and the tenets of that approach, but you can find that information at the website called Missouri Approach. Fast forward 23 years, I was recruited by the Annie Casey Foundation, and yes, we're going to do more, as a manager for the flagship Juvenile Justice Initiative, JEAI. It is now present in 39 states and the District of Columbia, and with the 8 core strategies, we have shown that we can safely reduce reliance on the use of secure detention and create a process in the system such that these kids would never ever enter the front door of the system. Recently, and I'm winding up, the president of our foundation made a bold call during a TEDx speech, and he says that for any state that was interested in reducing the number of youth entering the system and reforming practice and replacing the failed youth prison model, give us a call. I stand today behind that, and I hope that you would invite the system and the system stakeholders in the state that you live in to answer that call. There is no magic bullet at the Annie Casey Foundation and nor any magic solution. What we believe, though, is that the practices that we have help other states guide them through and to. We believe that together we can find some solutions so that not one other child suffers unjustly in these systems. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Davis, thank you so very much. And Gail, thank you so very much. Mark, thank you.
What Khalif Browder experienced was monstrous. To me, the surprise was not that the endless solitary confinement and the frequent attacks from staff and from other inmates damaged him so much. Rather, I was surprised he was able to survive at Rikers as long as he did. He was clearly a strong and smart young man who died as a result of terminal indifference by those responsible for protecting him. Everyone in the system failed him and violated his basic rights as a human being, as well as his legal rights in the fairy tale system of criminal justice in the Bronx. I spent the last 37 years of my life working to reform juvenile justice systems around the country. I've represented incarcerated young people in civil rights lawsuits in more than 15 states, and I've seen abuse in facilities in many more states. Khalif's mistreatment and the conditions at Rikers stand out as exceptionally violent and barbaric. Solitary confinement occurs regularly in local juvenile detention facilities and state juvenile commitment facilities. I've represented children held for 23 hours a day for weeks at a time. I've represented children held in rooms that are entirely rubber walls, rubber floor, and a hole in the floor as a toilet. And many young people are held in adult jails. On any given day, nearly 7,500 children are held in adult jails in this country. They are often the worst places. I've represented the parents of children 15 years old who committed suicide in county jails in California and Kentucky, and a 15-year-old girl raped by a guard in a county jail in Ohio, and a boy sexually assaulted by another prisoner in a jail in Maine. Solitary confinement is not the only form of institutional abuse in juvenile facilities and adult jails. Many facilities use abusive restraints. I've represented young people who were chained by their wrists and ankles to the four corners of their beds. I've seen young people in straitjackets and in restraints attached to the floor. And there is sexual abuse. The national survey by the Bureau of Justice Statistics found that almost 10% of incarcerated young people reported being victims of sexual abuse or sexual maltreatment at the hands of staff or other youth. Another major problem is the lack of adequate mental health care in juvenile facilities. Most have inadequate numbers of psychologists, psychiatrists, and social workers. Yet we know that up to 70% of youth in juvenile facilities have diagnosable mental health problems. These abuses are well documented. The victims of abuse are disproportionately youth of color and especially African American males. The Annie Casey Foundation recently issued a report entitled Maltreatment of Youth in U.S. Juvenile Corrections Facilities, which found documented systemic maltreatment in juvenile facilities in 29 states and substantial evidence of maltreatment in 3 other states. The great tragedy is that none of this is necessary. For example, Massachusetts, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Missouri do not use solitary confinement on young people. The corrections facility for the toughest kids in Mississippi does not use solitary confinement.
Wow.
We know how to handle young people in juvenile facilities without resorting to solitary confinement. And the legislation that will be introduced today properly provides that staff only use room confinement as a temporary response to youth behavior that threatens immediate harm to the youth or others. As soon as the youth calms down, they should be released from their room and go back to regular programming. That is the appropriate standard and should be the national standard in this country. Thank you.
Let me for a moment acknowledge Dr. Reverend Madeline McClintock Sadler. And I love that because I've got Sheila Jackson Lee, president and founder of the Exodus Foundation, nonprofit faith-based mentoring program for returning citizens. I just want her to stand. Give her an applause, please. We have several panelists of the Exodus Foundation that work with us, and we're going to be connected at the hip. I know that Chairman Conyers will look forward to your expertise. We are also greatly appreciative of the Open Society Foundation as well. They were very supportive, and we thank them very much. And Mark, what can I say about the long tenure that you've had? We need that feistiness. We want to get it all the way to the President's desk and get this legislation signed. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I will not call these two gentlemen twins, but they're sitting next to each other. We're almost coming to a point where we might squeak in some questioning, but I'm going to introduce them together. They're right next to each other. Chris Wilson, again, Director of Community Workforce for Development of Greater Homewood Community Corporation, and Sebastian Goodson, Exodus Foundation. They have wonderful, passionate stories. Would you begin now, please?
I remember growing up, at night, I used to sleep on the floor at night. I had a bed, but there was so much gun violence in my neighborhood, my grandmother wasn't taking any chances. So one night, I laid up on the floor and curled up in a blanket, and I read the story, Plato's Allegory of the Cave. And the story is of men that are chained up, they never leave this cave. And one person felt that there was more to life than being locked up in this cave 24 hours a day, so they escaped the cave and discovered a beautiful world outside of the cave. They're seeing colors for the first time, birds and looking at the clouds, and then they become enlightened. And so God sees them and says, what are you doing outside the cave? He's like, you have to go back down in the cave. You have to go down there because that's where you people belong, down there in the cave, not out here with us. So they lock him up and put him back down in the cave, and his friends tease and they mock him for trying to be different, and trying to buck the system. And then they say, anybody else tries to break out of this cave, we're going to kill you, because all we have is us. So this made me think about my neighborhood that I grew up here in Baltimore, in Washington, D.C., and we had a homicide rate of almost 500. There were shootings almost every single day in my neighborhood. And my grandmother would just tell me, just go to school, everything will be okay. And then my brother was shot 7 times. And then my cousin was shot 17 times in his face. And she would say, just pray, just go to school. And a few months later, I was knocked unconscious by a police officer, and when I woke up, he was raping my mom. And he took his service weapon out and he bashed her skull in. She lived, but she was never the same. I was never the same. And in my neighborhood, by the age of 16, I carried the scars equivalent of a war veteran. And the guys in my neighborhood said, don't worry about it, Chris, all we got is us. And these same people came after me one night, and I ended up taking a person's life. While awaiting trial, they came to my house. They killed my father. They tortured my brother. And to make matters worse, I was sentenced to natural life in prison as a juvenile. It was as if I was teleported to another planet. Humiliating strip searches every day. Solitary confinement. The warden ruled the prison with an armed fist. One fish acts up, drained the whole pond. I knew in my heart I was a good person and I could turn my life around, so I put together a plan, not an escape plan. And on this plan, I wanted to get my high school diploma, my college degree, I wanted to start a business, I wanted to learn Spanish, but most importantly, I wanted to be free. I wanted to return back to my community and make a difference. But the prison officials would tell me, life means life. Your place is in here, not out there in the world. Well, over a period of 10.5 years, I read hundreds of books. I got my high school diploma, I got my college degree, and I finally had an opportunity to go before the judge. And I ended up serving 16 years. And when I came home, my mom was shocked. I can't believe you're home. What happened? Did you break out? And I was like, no. She said, I just want to tell you that I love you. Just remember that. And later on that night, my mom committed suicide. So if she was here today, I would just love my mom to know that I've been home 3 years. I'm about to graduate from the University of Baltimore. I'm the owner of 2 successful businesses.
about the code that I want everybody to think. Going to that dark place. I want you to think about that dark place for a minute, because this is what Khalifa went through. This is what Chris went through, and this is what I went through, 25 years of it. My mom was a crack addict. So I had to play the young man who paid the bills at 10 years old. Can you picture drug dealers selling your mom drugs and you run around shooting or trying to harm them because they harm your mother and she don't know who you are? Let me tell you about the belly of the beast. 13 years solitary confinement. When you have to defecate on yourself and pee on yourself. When you count holes in the water, when you miss the number, you got to start back over again. Everybody go to that dark place. When you got a babysitter sitting at home and she's molesting you, are you in that dark place? Think about that. That's every young man who goes inside, a young woman who goes inside that prison. It ain't no officer, it ain't no police officer when they beat you to death. I watched it. I witnessed murderers cry at night. Cry out, wishing they wasn't never in solitary confinement. I was introduced as Mr. Jekyll meet Mr. Hyde. I was a football star, track star, who could have went to the NFL, could have ran track, but no, I chose the other way. But was it for me to get 180 years? Was I that young kid who needed 180 years, who had to fight for trial for 3 years, and get 30, to go through 25 years? Was I that bad? But see, the problem is we don't understand the problem. Because we keep creating the problem, we ain't trying to solve the problem. My professor is sitting out there in the audience. He also was an ex-army and an ex-police officer, one who was a part of me getting locked up. Charles Witherspoon, and he's my professor now.
Oh, very good.
But the thing about it,
Stand up, Professor.
not only did we form a relationship, he wasn't out there trying to beat me down or hurt me, but he was trying to show me a new way, but I didn't choose it. But when I went in, I didn't choose to also be demonstrated as slaves all over again, to be burned, to be kicked, to be dogged. You don't understand that it's an illness. Have we yet to actually question what's behind the crime? It's an illness. Did you know that this person might have been molested? His mom might have been on drugs, might not have had food in the house. But we're so quick to judge. We are not the judge. Just think about that dark place and understand that life is hard. But as long as I'm sitting up here, as long as it's an ExodusFoundation.org, as long as it's a Sheila Jackson, Mr. Hart, you ain't got to worry about that because we're going to help you. I promise you that. We're going to help you. It'll never be that again. But I just want everybody to remember, 25 years in that dark place. Each and every one of you has been in that dark place before. But you ain't experienced it on this level. Thank you again, Ms. Sheila Jackson, for allowing us, the Exodus Foundation, to come up here. I just want y'all to understand that what you think, it ain't what it is. The street ain't got nothing to do with the belly of the beast. When you watch people cry at night, out, because they've been taken. When you got to go to the shower with 3 or 4 homeboys because somebody want to take you, make you less than a man. When I seen a guy, he didn't even get a letter from his parents, and he jumped off the top tier, 3rd floor, head first. Is that justice? Come on now. Because we just had to go through all that. But we need to understand it's a dark place in there. It's called the belly of the beast. Thank y'all.
We We are doing great, and we have two last wonderful speakers, in Jennifer Davis and Marlo Johnson, and we turn the tables, the floor over to you. Powerful statements. Thank you all very much. Thank you. And then we have about 5 minutes, so we know that you all will manage. We appreciate you greatly.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marla Johnson. First of all, I want to thank Congresswoman Jackson for allowing me to be here today and speak amongst this panel. Ms. Ron, my heart solely goes out to you and your family. I work on the other side, correct? I don't personally know your pain, but I understand.
All right.
I'm here today to speak on behalf of corrections. And there's a million and one things that I could say, but it would only be repetitive to what everyone here on this panel has already stated. With 26 years of experience in the Maryland Department of Public Safety's Correctional Services Division, I have seen everything that these individuals here have spoken about. You know, and the question always comes about in my mind, how do we create hope and hope in place? You know, you bring a 16-year-old child in, 5 foot tall, 100 pounds, crying, desperately looking and seeking help. You know, what do you do with a child who's now motherless, who's fatherless, a child who's being brutally abused, a child who's being subjected to physical and mental trauma, a child who's being taken advantage of every single day. And oftentimes, just as Mr. Brown said to his mother, the code will get you killed. The code in the prison system will cost you your life. How do you make a choice? When do you make a choice? Do you choose to tell and run the risk of being killed, or do you choose to remain silent and bear the brunt of the trauma that you live with every single day? The things that you can't talk about to your family, the things that you won't talk about to corrections officials, the things that you live with every day in that dark place, in the belly of the beast, the things that never get addressed, the things that go unknown over time. Angela Davis quoted these words: walls of bridges turn sideways. And as a correctional officer, I've seen many walls built and constructed to find multitudes of individuals that we call enemies, but not nearly enough of them turn sideways to create the pathways to freedom. When I look at issues centered around the current state of the criminal justice system and the increasing rate of incarceration of our young people, I believe in my heart that there should be a resounding voice, piercing the hearts of every man across this country, renouncing the imprisonment of our youth and profoundly announcing that the lives of our children do matter. We can choose to turn a blind eye to the ills of this society because we are not directly affected by or impacted by the causes of incarceration. But there is a mental form of incarceration, and there's a confinement of the mind, which is the worst form of incarceration. We can choose to turn a blind eye and ignore what is happening to our children. But until we take a stand, until we support this bill that Congressman Jackson Lee is now presenting, until everyone comes together, that be law enforcement, corrections, attorneys, judges, people in society, until we come together and make the decision that the lives of our children are precedent and that they do matter, we will continue to see this problem escalate. I will close by saying this. Prisons do not disappear social problems. They disappear human beings. Homelessness, unemployment, drug addiction, mental illness, and illiteracy are only a few of the problems that disappear from public view when the human beings contending with them are relegated to cages.
As I yield to Attorney Davis, I can only say, Ms. Johnson, we need to multiply you while the system exists. And then we need to catapult you across America to educate and to sensitize. You are there. And don't say that you are any wimp. Thank you for being there and being a lifeline. Thank you so very much.
I would like to open by following Ms. Johnson, saying if I could only have Ms. Johnson for the 10 years that I represented children charged as adults. They were housed in the Baltimore City Detention Center in the oldest part of the jail, a jail that was built in 1801. They were housed on a 4-story tier, and their first 2 weeks in, which ECDC would like to call orientation, meant that you were locking yourself for 23 hours a day. You were let out to go to the bathroom. And you remained on that tier if you had any mental health issues or if they were what we call, my clients were vulnerable, 14, 15, 16, under 100 pounds. You got to move off that tier to M section, which meant you got to be out for school and eat. And my second trip there, I visited a young man, and I walked up to him and I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "I need to go to medical." And he picked up his hand and his booty. Because the jail is so old, and because the correctional officers don't know how to deal with children, and they get impatient with children that have ADHD that go unmedicated, because we can't have medication in the jail because it's abused. The old mechanism that locked the doors, they'd call the kids to the front and they'd say, "Keep your hand off the door." Well, that day, this particular young man didn't hear it, and the lock cut off the last 2 part of his fingers, and they didn't give him treatment for 2 days, and he sat in the cell. I'm happy to say, as I sit here now, that due to the work of lovely and other people in my office, that children charged as adults in Baltimore City are now able to be housed in the Juvenile Justice Center. But it's still detention, and it's still incarceration, and their needs are still not being met. I represent a young man, as many of you know. After Freddie Gray's death, there was a lot of unrest in the city of Baltimore. He was an 18-year-old charged with malicious destruction of property, whose picture got put all over C-SPAN, so I'm sure most of you have seen it, put on a $500,000 bail. And since he's represented by my office, it means that, quite frankly, his income level of his family is 15 to 20% below the poverty line, so there's no way he can make that bail. The injustice is that the police officers charged in the death of Freddie Gray were released on $200,000 to $300,000 bail. This is only one example of how we continuously overcharge, put higher bail or no bail status on young men that are between 15 and 20-year-old African-American men in Baltimore City every day. And they sit in those conditions that Ms. Johnson talked about, and they can never recover from that. Whether you're in there for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years, the Bradford family sits as testimony, they're children, and we treat them like animals. No matter what they're charged with, their brains are not fully developed until they're 23 to 25 years old, and we treat them like animals. So I would like to leave the panel today with thinking that while I do think we've made progress, at least in Baltimore City, that children charged as adults in the state of Maryland all should be housed in juvenile facilities and be on the lowest bail possible with services to help their children. Thank you.
Enormously powerful statements. And I started out this presentation with indicating that something was happening here on the Hill that has never happened before. Combination of genius and pain, but also motivation and inspiration. I'm very grateful that you are here. What I'd like to say is that we're about now to introduce our legislation. We'd like all of our panelists to remain, and those who can remain, it will be open for your questions after we introduce the legislation. But let me, so that you can applaud them again, acknowledge Attorney Jennifer Davis. I'm giving singular applause. Attorney Jennifer Davis, raise your hand. Debbie St. Jean. Chris Wilson. Sebastian Goodson. Marlo Johnson. And some more. Paul Prestia. Did y'all give them a very big applause? Dr. Davis. Mark Solar. L.D. Mumford. And our courageous medical doctor, Dr. Antoinette Kavanaugh. And John Conyers. So let me thank all of you. I need the team that's supposed to take over now to get us in place. I really would hope that if they're not in place yet, then let me just indicate, let me thank our law enforcement officers who we will introduce shortly. Thank you for your presence here. Exodus, thank you for your presence here, and the representatives. We'll be calling all you up for our press conference. But let me just say, is there one question here from a young person that wants to ask a question or make a statement? And then we're going to go into the press conference. We can.
Oh, there has to be one.
Okay. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to thank all of you for opening our eyes to the experiences that go unseen in our society. And the massive majority of us, no matter our color or our economic status, there are experiences that some of us thankfully never have to suffer through, but we need to open our eyes to. Thank you for doing that.
Who wants to take that question? I'm sorry. Okay, but did we, she just made a statement?
Just a statement.
Okay. Thank you for the statement. One last question? Yes, sir.
Just want to thank you guys for speaking and sharing the spotlight on solitary confinement. I was once charged as an adult.
Speak up, sir. Speak up.
I was once charged as an adult, as a juvenile. Me and my comrade right here, and we spent X amount of much time in solitary confinement. And just thank you guys for, putting that spotlight on solitary confinement. Thank you guys for speaking.